Hey, welcome back to Storytelling on the Plains. I'm your host, Irene, today. We're going to finish up talking about Dobby's frontier town. If you head up to Alliance, Nebraska, it's in the northeastern part of town, not too far from Carhenge, which we will get to an episode on as well, but Dobby's frontier town is a unique and sometimes overlooked neat little piece of history that if you have the time you should really go and check out. So we're going to start today with the popular Lonesome Duck Saloon and Bordello. The saloon was where everyone gathered. That was just the place you went to when you first came to town or you wanted to hang out in town. It was a bar, but it was also a town hall or a courtroom. If you were new to town, you went to the saloon to get all the information you needed. I guess it served as a visitor center as well. And I love the description of the bordello upstairs from the saloon. The bordello upstairs was usually the only source of entertainment and occasionally social education that a young man might be exposed to while single. We all know what went on up there. And Dobby's frontier town tactfully explains what it is. Again, the jingling you hear is my cat Irene. They are welcome to join me every week on Storytelling on the Plains. They run around, they cause havoc everywhere they go. They're always up to something new. Hopefully you don't hear my heater. It is really, really cold here in Scottsbluff today. This isn't going to go out for a couple of weeks, but today is March 14th, 2026 when I'm recording this, and this past week we had some horrendous winds. We lost power 3 times in an hour. Thankfully, it was only 3 to 5 seconds each. I have bird feeders on one of those tall poles, and they were swinging so bad I thought they were going to get knocked off and broken or sent across the yard, so I brought them inside, and one of them has a little plastic base. It kind of sucks because it's a metal bird feeder, but it's got a plastic base. That part kind of makes me crabby, and there were a couple of nicks out of it, just from the wind, and it's blowing so bad it's swinging and hitting the metal pole. So that'll be something I will look at closer in the future if I need to replace the bird feeder. But it was really, really bad, and it's still chilly today, and I normally try and turn the heat off before we come and record, or just me today. But it's 68 in the house, and I don't know how y'all are, but I like it at 72 or 73. And when this house was built, I don't think they built the HVAC system correctly, because downstairs is always about 5 degrees colder than upstairs. So I put the heat on, and then I started recording, and I can hear the heat coming through the vent. So if you can hear it, I apologize. You're just going to have to suffer through it with me because I'm cold and this is the only time I can record today. So just deal with it and be happy you're not outside at Dobby's frontier town right now because it's cold outside. So back to Dobby's and the bordello. The bordello at Dobby's has a separate entrance from the saloon. We often see in Hollywood movies the bar is downstairs and then there's an upstairs with a big old landing area with some separate rooms inside the saloon, and that's usually where the workers are at. That's not how it is at Dobby's. This one particular place, it was outside, and it could actually be one of many different kinds. You could have the bordello outside attached to the saloon. You could have a completely separate building. It could be in the bar. It just depends on how it was built. And usually places like that were able to survive, even though it was illegal, because often the local police were the ones that were either full or part owners in the place. So they're going to look the other way because they're making money. Not much has changed in 100 years, 200 years. The Lonesome Duck Saloon has some very cool items in it as well. The bar came out of a saloon owned by Billy King and was known as King's Corner. This was located on the southeastern corner of 3rd and Box Butte, where Dave's Pharmacy and Alliance is located today. The bar was originally 4 times as long and was the longest in the state. When Prohibition came in, the bar was gradually cut down to make room for more pool tables. The skies on the wall are handmade. The cowhide is from a Scottish Highlander, which was one of the imported breeds to come to the area in the 1920s. They were a fad breed and never really caught on with the breeders of the Angus and Herefords we have locally. You might see an occasional one out here in western Nebraska, but by and large, you're going to see Angus and Herefords out here, and some Longhorns, but you're not really going to see Scottish Highlanders. So I'm going to keep reading here from Dobby's website. The coat on the hook by the piano is made from a Hereford hide and weighs about as much as a small child. There is also a soapstone for heating on the fire and then putting it under your feet in your backboard when you went home or later in your Model T. There are also several pictures of what Alliance looked like in the early part of the century hanging on the wall by the bar. And I remember as a little kid, I thought it was weird that I would see and hear stories about people using bricks for keeping your bed warm, because we had water bottles, different from the water bottles we drink out of, but it didn't make sense to me as a little kid. But yeah, you take a brick that was heated in a fire and you put it in your bed, you're going to stay warm. And same kind of premise with the soapstones for heating your fire, for putting it under your feet. And you know, I hadn't thought about it, but yeah, when cars were first built, they didn't have all these fancy gadgets inside. You didn't have heat. You know, if you had to drive any kind of distance in that Model T in, 10-degree weather, your feet are going to freeze. So yeah, get a hot soapstone, put it down there by your feet, keep your feet warm while you're driving. And if you go out to Dobby's, you can see that in the saloon. So the livery stable is what it says it is. And I also need to apologize because last time I called it a livery stable as well. I am so used to watching Formula One and they call it a livery. In America, we usually call it a livery. Either word works fine. It's just I'm used to the other one. You could store a wagon or a carriage there, and basically a livery or a livery stable is a place where you keep your cars, your wagon, your carriage, your Formula One car, and in Formula One too, they refer to the livery as the paint job on the car. So the word has multiple uses, and again, we don't do etymology here, but it'd be interesting to see if the two are actually connected, because sometimes we have the same word that we use for different things, and they actually evolved differently into those words, and then sometimes they have the same root word. But go listen to things like the History of English podcast to learn those kind of things. First National Bank is the big bank in Alliance, and the bank here has a neat little story to it. Inside the bank at Dobby's are various tools needed in a bank, such as a check writer. And many of you probably have never seen a manual check writer. The bank also has a strong box from a stagecoach. It's not like in the movies, though. Strong boxes have their name for a reason, and you aren't lifting it willy-nilly like they do on film. Those suckers are heavy because they don't want you walking off with what's inside of it. The teller cage came from a bank in Whitewood, South Dakota. As far as we know, the last time it was used was when the bank was robbed by the hole-in-the-wall gang. It was replaced with a cast-iron teller cage, which the bank thought might have stopped robberies. We also have a safe from the First State Bank, and it dates from the early 1900s. So we being the folks at Dobby's, because I'm still reading a quote from them. The bank went out of business in the early 30s, and Dobby lost $10 when it closed. I neglected to look up how much $10 is worth today, but it's in the 1930s, $10 was a sizable chunk of change. Just using for reference, in the 1990s, when I got my first apartment, my grocery bill was $25 a month. $10 was a lot of money. So he lost a little chunk of change. Everything a teller did was by hand. There were no adding machines or electronics. So sometimes you might walk into a business and see someone in accounts receivable. They got one of those big adding calculators, and it's just the numbers, and they're just going at it with their fingers. They didn't even have those yet when the banks did everything by hand. You added all that stuff up yourself. Dobby's has a register from one of the local banks which shows what transactions were like, including one that says, Mrs. Jones deposited 25 cents savings. That gives you a sense of, if I'm going to deposit money in my bank, in my savings, you're looking 10, 20, 50, $100 might be standard today. 25 cents, that was a lot of money then. Also inside the bank is the patent attorney's office, complete with patent books for 6 months in 1906. So you can go and see how they kept their ledgers. Today you do all of that stuff on a computer. Wherever you see a piece of paper sticking out of this book, there's something on that page that Dobby has in his vast collection. So that's a neat little piece of history right there. You've got the patent book that covers 6 months of the year 1906, so you get that little window into 1906. And then Dobby also stuck a little piece of paper in a page where that thing that's in that ledger is in Dobby's. That's, I don't know, I'm a dork. I think that's kind of cool. Dobby's Frontier Town also has a prairie fabric shop. This is where you purchased fabric for everything from furniture to curtains to towels to clothes. The Candy Snap, candy with a K, not a C, is the once popular sugar bowl from 1914. Visna Watain Steinman purchased the business, relocating it and renamed it the Candy Shop. Visna's son Jim bought the business and continued the fine tradition of making confections until 1955. It was then purchased by Eloise Hill, who kept the candy pots boiling until 1976. And there is a fine chocolate costs money, especially today. When I was a little kid in New York, there was a town about 25 minutes away, and I believe the confectioner shop is still there. They make homemade chocolate and fudge. And we might go there once every 2 years because, one, it costs money to get 25 minutes there and 25 minutes back. And two, the chocolate is not cheap. And my mom went a little more often as she got older, and I was raised in out of the house, and my nephew was raised in out of the house because my mom liked the finer chocolates. And even after a week that it takes longer now, but it used to take about a week to mail me something from New York to here. That chocolate was still miles above what you buy in the store. It is worth the money. It's handcrafted, handmade. And Alliance had their own shop up until 76. That is super awesome and super cool, and I'm kind of jealous of them that they had that, because my hometown, as far as I know, never had one. You always went over to this other town to get it. And maybe the one in my hometown maybe just went away before my mom became an adult, so she didn't remember it. Anyway, that's kind of cool. They got the candy shop at Dobby's. In the same area as the candy shop is the stagecoach. The stage part of the word is the calculated distance between 2 points on a route. So if I were to say to get here from Scottsbluff to Alliance is about 50 minutes, I can do it in less time. Just don't tell the cops. That would be the stage. So if I was going from here to Alliance to Crawford, the stage between Scottsbluff and Alliance is about 50 minutes. We just kind of don't talk that way anymore. We call them stops. We don't call them stages anymore. But you will hear that in things like endurance racing, this stage, that stage. You still get to that. The Tour de France still uses stages. So the word is not out of our language, but it's just used less frequently today. Sheridan County District Number 100 was one of the first country schools in that county. Man, I should have written that sentence better, because I didn't realize when I was writing it. It's a lot of different hard syllables that I'm floundering over reading out loud. The school was in operation for more than 100 years. Most of the county schools in western Nebraska have been closed, but this one was preserved. I'm not sure how many times the school was moved, but it sat in its last location for 50 years before it came to Dobby's. And many times, if families moved about in the county, they picked up the school and moved it to a closer location. I've come across that in doing some research into Sioux County. They literally, the school was also their church, and if folks moved from one part to another, wherever the most people were, they tended to just pick up the school and move it. That's just kind of how things worked. It makes sense. Everybody's moving to this other location because it's better for planting or homesteading or whatever. So they move the building rather than make people go even farther to get to the building. So the original building was also expanded on 3 times. One being and I'm going to quote from Dobby's as well again here. One being a 16 by 16 one-room schoolhouse. The second edition provided an 8 by 16 foot expansion, and the third edition provided an entry and bathrooms with running water. The schoolyard consisted of teeter-totters, swings, a basketball stand, along with a good area for running in the grass, parking wagons, tying up horses, or parking cars later on. And I did not cover it because I think you should go out and learn the history yourself, but this young lady named Jordan went to school there. She was one of the last ones that went to that school. And she eventually became a WNBA basketball player. Rare thing, but go learn that history, because they got some of her artifacts there at the school as well. Moving the school to Dobby's was not an easy task. It took 2 years to gather the supplies, manpower, and equipment, but once it got rolling, it moved very nicely. Again, remember, this is all done by volunteers through volunteer work. They need to raise the money to rent the equipment to move the building, and then they got to get all the folks that are going to volunteer to help move to be there on the same day. It takes a lot. It's it's not like it's being paid for, so you just call up a moving company. Oh yeah, we'll be there on the 27th, and they move it. You got to raise the funds for this. So the school library is stocked with books during the time of its existence. There's a teacher's bell and the drama curtains, which date from the 1920s. So there's quite a bit of history just in this one building. And history buffs will immediately notice the maps are pre-World War II. So go and learn a little history by looking at those old maps. The piano is also the original one that was in the school, and it still works. And don't forget to drop by Robert Ball Anderson's log cabin. We covered Anderson in a previous episode, so please give a listen to that episode and hear about his life and the cabin. But you can go to the cabin in Alliance, and you can walk in it and look at all the stuff in there. Things to check out in that cabin is a picture of Robert's wife, Daisy, who we also did an episode on, which was taken at her home in Colorado many, many years after Robert had passed away and she moved to Colorado. The cabin was brought into Dobby's on a flatbed trailer and restored. Its main center beam is original, while the rest are replacements. From what I understand, the cabin was really badly in disrepair. So a lot of it's restored, but it's not, the main beam is the original. So I guess technically not properly restored. Not restored in the sense that we had all the original bits and put them back together after we fixed them. Some of them were in such bad repair that, okay, well, this was X feet long. We need to get another piece of wood, same length, same shape, same build, to put in that place. So it's kind of part replica, part restoration, but Dobby made sure it looked exactly as it did when it was standing not far from Crawford. So it also had a journey before it came to Dobby's. Dobby was a charter member of the Nebraska Baled Hay Association, so it's not surprising he had an example of a baled hay house in his frontier town. The baled hay house is a reconstruction which showcases an old building process that was used in the Alliance area and in the Sandhills for decades. If you couldn't afford sod or lumber for your house, you used hay. So I'm going to quote again from Dobby's website. They would cut and bale the hay, stack it, and use those bales for walls of the house. From there, limestone and sand were used to stucco the inside and outside walls. Precious wood would then be used for roofing. These houses maintain a fairly even temperature year-round due to their high insulation value. 18 inches of straw with stucco on both sides really slows down heat transfer either in or out of the house. The houses were cheap, and they could last a long time, something to consider when you're arriving in your new homestead. There's not a lot of trees out here to build your house, so if you're building a lumber house, more than likely you're going to be it's going to come by train, more than likely, and you're going to buy the lumber elsewhere, and it's going to be brought in by train. Now, there are places here in Scotts Bluff. Now, Alliance, different area. It's further north than us. If I remember correctly, the Gentry House, which you can see down at Legacy of the Plains Museum, and you can go in the house as well. I'll have to get in touch with Don Gentry and ask a few more questions to make sure that I have the story right before I write the story. But his family went up into the Wildcat Hills and brought the logs down and over the river to the Minnetonka area to build their house. There are fewer trees up there in the Alliance area. Alliance is right there on the edge of the Sand Hills. So while you could have local lumber, it's likely that the lumber was brought in. Sod also wasn't cheap, but you can get hay a heck of a lot cheaper, and it seemed to be really good at keeping your house warm in the winter. The houses were cheap. They lasted a whole lot longer than sod houses, even though sod cost more. And hay was a baled hay house was also naturally good at soundproofing. You could easily expand your house, and it required little labor in the construction. I've read stories as well that I don't want to say it was amazingly cool, but there was a big enough temperature difference when you went from the hot outside in July to inside the baled hay house. It was cooler inside too. So it was not only a cheaper option, but it seems like it was probably the better option. Next up is a little building that was almost lost to time. The Texaco gas station is assumed to be the first known filling station in Dawes County and possibly western Nebraska. It was in Chadron State Park when Dobby rescued it from the edge of a ravine. I think it was someplace else. Yeah, we'll get to that in a minute. I'm getting ahead of myself. If Dobby hadn't taken the little Texaco station, it likely would have fallen down into the ravine and onto a dry creek bed, and then it would have been gone. When Dobby came across it, apparently its posts that were holding up were giving way, and so they were already leaning toward the ravine. So he was like, hey, let's save this. So Lori White told 1011 News in an interview that if you go to the east side of that building down below, you can actually see where a tree was holding that building from falling. Its logs likely came from the Chadron area and originally sat somewhere to the east of Chadron and was later moved toward Chadron State Park. And just a little side note, Chadron State Park is also our oldest state park. So there was a whole lot of things going against the little Texaco station when Dobby came across it, and he was like, no, we need to save this. So on the walls, you will see an old tire repair iron, and several different types of oil cans and paraphernalia used in vehicle service of the day. And remember that the Model A and Model T cars were the thing when this station was built and run. So keep that in mind. Get a mental picture of what a Model A and a Model T car looked like, and you'll understand why this gas station was built the way they were. Model A's and Model T's were simple vehicles, and this was a simple station. Most of the vehicle repair work was either done outside or in a lean-to type of building that was usually attached to the side or the back of a building like the Texaco gas station at Dobby's. There weren't a lot of things to do with a car like a Model T and a Model A. My car is a 2015, and it does have a touch screen for the radio, but that's it. Everything else is buttons. The radio and CD player, which I've never used, and I also have a USB drive, which I can put my music onto a USB drive, stick it in the USB drive, and then it works through that little touch screen. That's about as far as I will go. I do not want a new car today with all the computers and electronics and everything in it. This car is also the first car I ever had that had automatic windows. Everything before that was hand-rolling windows. And if you think about it, you can't work on any of that stuff outside, especially in windy Nebraska. You're going to damage the parts while you're trying to fix things or update things. And you just didn't have that kind of stuff in a car back around the time of the Model T and the Model A. So repairs were often done outside. Even as a kid growing up, my neighbor up the street would work on his car, and he would just work on it at the end of the driveway. He had a garage, but he worked on the car at the end of the driveway. He very rarely had it in the garage. And I know there are people that still do that way, but it is very much going away. You need to have some kind of enclosed space to work on a car these days. And so if you go to Dobby's and you see this Texaco gas station, it's not really missing anything because there wasn't anything to be missing. There wasn't giant garages. And it still looks cool. The general store is a replica Dobby made of what they typically looked like. These stores usually had small amounts of goods on hand, and you could order almost anything else. When the men were often gossiping at the saloon, this was the place the ladies gossiped. So for those of you who think men didn't gossip, go back in time and go to the saloon. You're going to hear lots of gossip. The ladies go over here to the general store, maybe the dress shop, and catch up on the gossip in town. What's going on? If we have a saloon, we probably also have a still. A still is a device used to distill liquor or perfume. It's basically a way to make booze. Technically, even someplace that, a company of them, this is just going to show how much I don't drink liquor. You are still going to have a still at something like Jameson's or any kind of Tennessee whiskey. Their stills are just gigantic. These were much smaller, and they would make their liquor usually in town. Yeah, you could order the out-of-town stuff, but it's way more expensive, and you can make the cheap swill in town, and people will still buy it and drink it. You go to the store today to buy liquor, you can still buy the cheap stuff, and you can buy the expensive stuff, and I know it has I've toured distilleries, so I know it has something to do with the way things are distilled, how it's distilled, how long it's stored, what it's stored in, all that other stuff. But you can make cheap stuff with a small still in the back of your house and sell it at the saloon, or maybe even in the saloon and then sell it. But just don't ever think that nobody gossiped, because even the men gossiped. The still house at Dobby's Town has a fantastic history to it as well. So there's this guy named Clyde Rust, and Clyde was a local bootlegger during the Prohibition era. His still was in the fields north of Dobby's frontier town. He was a hog farmer, and the still house had another purpose other than being a still. It was at one time a lookout for the local highways and the revenuers. Everyone knew that Clyde had hooch. And for those of you that are not familiar, hooch is usually some kind of illegal booze. And it's usually pretty potent. Everyone knew that Clyde had hooch, but no one could find the still until many years after the repeal of Prohibition. So not only was he making his hooch in the still house north of town, he was using it as a lookout for when the authorities were coming. He sold his hooch out of the main house, which is why inspectors couldn't find it. He didn't sell it out of the still house, and we're going to get to that in a minute. Dobby purchased the main house in 1962 and began remodeling it. During that process, Dobby found the flavoring lists for medicinal purpose only in the rafters and the long sought-after stash spot in the stairwell. It is still there, although now covered with carpet. I don't know why. Maybe the revenuers didn't really care. I don't know why they didn't find it. It's stashed in the stairwell. I guess they weren't looking hard enough. Or maybe they just didn't think to look there, because it is kind of an ingenious spot to look. Anyway, the still house has a working still and a collection of items used in the making and transportation of alcohol. The house also uses a working cider press, and it's used for the annual fall festival for cider. Local apples are sourced for the job. Dobby's had apples grown on site, but old age and disease claimed those trees, so they try and get what they can locally, but they're still using that old still during the fall festival. They just, they're making apple cider. They're not making any booze. So don't get any ideas there. And I'm going to quote again from Dobby's website. The still house is, or sorry, not the still house. The still is a 2-stage press, with the first stage grinding the apples into a pulp and then pressing the pulp into a juice. The press is similar in design to those used in hog butchering, which were used to press hog fat to render lard, the main difference being size and function. And I won't talk too much about Dorothy's fine fashions, because I'm going to do a separate story on Dorothy Hargren's Waldron. But the dress shop is near the still, and one day while I was up there, Dorothy took me all throughout the little shop to explain how it all worked. And Dorothy was a very neat character in herself, and I feel like she needs her own episode, and this is my podcast, so she's getting her own episode, no matter how long it turns out to be. If you left a little town, you needed a dress shop where the ladies could get the latest fashions. If the lady of the house required an undergarment, a new corset, slip, or camisole, she might head to the general store to see what was available from the ready-made stuff. She could peruse the catalog for store-bought finery at the general store, or possibly through the mail in the form of a Ward's or Sears catalog. When she wanted something special, she would always go to that dress shop to see what she could find or have something created just for her. And since we're living in 2026, there's probably people that have no idea about Ward's or Sears. So Montgomery Ward's and Sears were two different major department stores in this country. And even as a kid in the 80s, you would get the Sears catalog in the mail, because they could only hold so much stuff in the store, even though when I was a kid, there was no Montgomery Ward's. There was just Sears at my mall. And it was one of the anchor stores, so it was one of the three main stores at that mall. But they can't carry everything, so they still had their catalog, and you would look through the catalog, ooh, that's what I want, and you'd order it, and you'd wait a few weeks, and it would come in. As a little kid, September-ish, I think, September, October, you would get the Christmas catalog in the mail, and I would flip through it, and I'd be like, page 57, I want this toy, and I had this big old list. My mom never gave us an amount that we had to stay under, so I would just pick stuff I wanted, and I didn't get a lot of stuff that I wanted. Every year, in addition to the Sears catalog, I always put that I wanted a lynx, because I love bobcats. I love Iberian lynxes. All the lynxes in the lynx family, I wanted one. And my mom never got me one. So I was usually kind of crabby every Christmas because I never got a lynx. I never even got a stupid toy gift that was like a little plastic lynx that I could hold in my hand. And I was still kind of crabby about it, which is why when I got to meet Bonnie the Bobcat over at our local zoo, it was fantastic. Bonnie came to the zoo. She had pneumonia. And by the time she got over her pneumonia, she had imprinted on humans, so she couldn't be released back in the wild. And she was still like 10 months old. And so I got to hold her before she went out. Anyway, it was very, very cool because I got my lynx. I got to play with a lynx, and it made me happy for the rest of my life. But anyway, back in this time, you had the Montgomery Ward or the Sears catalog, and you could get almost anything out of it, but you just had to wait a few weeks for it to come. So at the dress shop, you could get any garment you had, men's or women's, altered there. So even if you had something, say you lost some weight, you could get it altered. Or your dad gives you, his best suit. He got a new suit, and the pants need to be taken in a little. Or maybe you're a couple inches shorter than him, so you need to shorten the legs. You'd go to the dress shop, and they would get it sorted for you. Same thing for women. With dresses or pants or whatever garment you had, they could probably alter it for you. And Milktown is complete without a post office, and Dobby's has one of those too. The one here is a replica of the original Grand Lake post office. And like I had said before, Grand Lake was the original name of Alliance. I don't know why they changed it. Because I kind of like Grand Lake better than Alliance, but wasn't my choice. So I'm going to read from Dobby's Frontier Town again. It was located on West 3rd Street, close to the alley behind the Bank of the West. And the Bank of the West is now the MBO Bank. It's probably always going to be a bank building, though. Who knows, though? Could change. Because there's a very good Mexican place in town called La Bonita, and they're in the former U.S. Bank building. And it's a little restaurant, and a daughter and her mother own it and run it, and the food is really, really good. Anyway, back to Dobby's. At that time, 3rd Street was also known as Wyoming Street. Can you imagine if you live in a town where they just decide, we're just going to start renaming the streets? That's going to take forever for you to get used to, and you're going to confuse non-residents of that town when you tell them to go down Wyoming Street, but it's been changed to 3rd Street. Just leave the names alone. It's not like Wyoming Street is some kind of horrible name that you have to change. I could see if it was named Hitler Street, and then, we need to change it to 3rd Street. Yeah, that makes sense. But Wyoming Street? Why? Anyway, it was built around 1882 and burned down in the Great Fire of 1892, when much of that part of downtown Alliance burned. At the time, Alliance was known as Grand Lake, Nebraska. There was a rather large spring-fed lake just west of town, now known as the remains of Bronco Lake. So I'm assuming Bronco Lake was the Grand Lake, and you should have kept the name. This is all I'm saying. When the railroad decided to come through the area, the station master decided to call us Alliance in hopes of pushing us further up on the schedules and more prominent in the viewer's eyes. So there you go. They changed the name because they thought they could make more money off of it. And that the town would be more prominent and more things would come to the town and more money, and it didn't work. I don't know. Grand Lake sounds pretty cool. Yeah. The boxes inside the post office came from the Gandy, Nebraska post office, which is a village of 34 residents today and is just north of North Platte, Nebraska. The metal counter is from the old treasurer's office in Alliance, Nebraska. The uniforms were donated by Tom Dill, who carried mail in Alliance for many years. That's super cool that you actually got an old postal worker's uniform, because they have changed over the years. And you'll notice, too, that since the post office got a contract with Amazon, often you don't see postal workers in their uniforms because some of them aren't. They're contractors, and so they aren't allowed to wear the uniforms. It's confusing, but it's neat to be able to look back in time and see how the uniforms used to look. The fence posts came from Kansas and were hand-hewn from the sandstone they have in abundance in the Flint Hills area. These were used as a cash crop for some of the farmers. One of the posts was drilled in the winter, and the other was done in the summer. The difference is noted on how smooth or rough the cuts are. These were taken around the countryside and sold. So my guess is the ones in made in winter had rougher cuts because it's cold, and so you're not as, your hand's probably shaking. That's the other neat thing, too, is Dobby could go all over and get these bits for a post office. And it was all stuff that was probably in your local post office because they're all kind of the same. They all have, you walk in, you have your rows of mailboxes. You've got your counters where here, I need to mail this thing. And you have your back area, which is all big and open where you sort all the mail. Today they're a little different because you have, places that are just sorting facilities, but that's the general gist of it. So it was easy to get things from different places. And even though some post offices and some places that I've been in, and it's usually like big crime-ridden areas might have had bars, and the postal workers were behind those bars. I believe it was that way in the olden days, too, because you could still send postal money orders, so you got money going in and out of the post office. My experience in my lifetime, I have mailed mail all over New York State and all over the state of Nebraska, and I have never seen anything behind bars. I think the one time I was in New York City, they were behind plexiglass, but I was only there once, and I only vaguely remember it. It's not that big of an issue these days, because of the Depression. We got the FDIC, which has your money guaranteed, so the banks don't have to keep gigantic amounts of money on hand. If you're going to rob the post office today, you might get a couple $100 at best. During this time, they may have thousands. And you go back to the late 1800s, early 1900s, and those thousands are tens to hundreds of thousands today. And your post office just doesn't have that kind of cash on hand today. And even more so now, where most people pay by credit. I do a mix. It just depends. If I got cash in my pocket, I'll pay cash. But it was a much bigger deal back then. Back in the day as well, even though Alliance got its mail daily on the train, there was only limited service out to the rural areas. So if you lived in town, you might get your mail every day. But most people would just ring up the post office and let them know they were coming into town. And again, that's if they had a phone. And even when phones became a little more popular, you're still not delivering out too much to the rural areas. So they would have a box probably at the post office, and they just ring up the post office, say, hey man, I'm going to be there Wednesday about 9, and they'd make sure everything was all collected and ready when you got to the post office. The post office was also a place where community bulletins and news were located. My post office in New York did this when I was a little kid in the 70s, and I haven't been in that post office in 30 years, but I know where the bulletin board was, and part of it used to have posters of the America's Top 10 Most Wanted, and it also would have pictures of missing kids from the area, and then, community things like this church is having a penny social, or, that church is having a potluck, or there's a yard sale here, or whatever. It just had little community things like that, like you go to the post office, you have a look at it, and, oh, okay, this is what's going on in town. Some post offices still do that. The one here in Scottsbluff, I don't really see that anymore. Where that used to be, they have things for sale on the wall. And I'm just guessing that, different times. You want to know who America's Top 10 Most Wanted is, go type it into Google. They don't have it posted. At least not now. Next time I go to the post office, I'm going to have a closer look, but I'm pretty sure there's nothing like that there. I don't know about my hometown post office because, again, I haven't been there in forever. So another neat Little history fact, according to the folks at Dobby's, is the post office was the first frontier town building to be completed. It was on display in the mini park at 3rd Street and Box Butte Avenue for the centennial celebration in 1988. So that's the first building they built in Alliance was we need a post office. We need to get our mail in and out safely. And so that's what they did. And as we covered in our previous episode on air bases in the Panhandle, the Army wanted one in Alliance. About a mile south of town was the location of the airfield. And in the spring of 1942, things got busy. We got World War II going on, and stuff needs to be built, and we need people to build it. So Alliance had everything that the Army wanted. There was water, cheap land, a new power plant, and a new hospital were just built, and it was an important railroad division point, and I believe it still is, because you go from Alliance many, many different directions, and you don't really get that. And I'm thinking in my mind the maps out here. I think it is still a big hub. I know North Platte is way bigger, but North Platte by car today is 4 hours away, 3 hours away, 3 or 4. So it's still a good distance away. And in 1942, that's all the stuff that the Army was looking for to put an air base in. At the time, little-known Alliance had 6,250 people in the town, roughly, because that's what was in the 1940 census, and we're 2 years ahead, so roughly the same amount of people. And they saw 5,000 construction workers just descend on the town to build 4 9,000-foot runways. And Dobby's has one of those World War II barracks from the time. Go and check it out. It's pretty neat. And go and check out our previous episode on air bases out here and what happened during World War II. So finally, we come to the main house at Dobby's Frontier Town. It was built in 1886. The McDonald family also occupied this home in its earlier years, and their cook stove is in the bale house. So when you go look at the baled hay house, the cook stove that was used in the main house is in that bale house. The main house also has all kinds of really, really, really cool things in it. It just tons and tons of stuff. I can't even say. I was like, can I touch that? Can I touch that? Can I touch that? Because I was a reporter and I'm doing the story and they're literally showing me around the town and all the cool things, and I'm like, oh my God, can I touch that? And they're like, yeah, and they're just laughing because they're like, yeah, touch it. You can touch it. It's fine. I seriously spend some time up there. So the main house was also Clyde Rust's home. So you remember Clyde just from a few minutes ago. He's the bootlegger, and he had the still house. There were rumors at the time that Al Capone came and visited and played cards upstairs during Prohibition, but those are just stories. It's hard to tell if it's true. We do know Al Capone traveled. We do know he traveled out to Vegas. Did he stop in Alliance? Maybe. It's plausible. You go from Chicago to Vegas. It's plausible. He may have. We don't know. There's really no way to know unless we can build a time machine and go back to the Prohibition era and sit around and wait and see if Al shows up. So moonshine recipes, for medical purposes, of course, were also found in the attic of the main house. After Dobby purchased the home in 1962, he added a garage as well as the family room, another bathroom, and bedroom. He also changed the basement entry from outside to inside. That would require, to me, there's a difference between a basement and a cellar. A basement only has access from inside the house. A cellar has access from outside the house. The home that I grew up in New York had a separate cellar from the basement. the basement had access from outside as well as inside, and the cellar, you had to literally leave the house to go into the cellar. So they essentially just closed the door off and then made an entryway in the house. I don't know why Dobby did it, but he did it. While Dobby was alive, the house was hit by lightning twice. One strike hit a large tree by the back porch, and the second strike took out the electrical in the kitchen. I did come across, while I was researching this, a partial article about a big old tree that had been there for a couple of 100 years that they basically had to cut down because it was getting to be really old and I don't think it was safe anymore. And I only have part of the article and I couldn't find the other part. So if I ever find that, maybe I'll do a short 5-minute story on the tree at Dobby's Town. The last time I visited Dobby's, I was still overwhelmed with all the items and history in this house. It is truly an amazing place, and I'm hoping to get some time to go back up there this year. There's just so much there. It just plan time to spend some time there and not just walk by and go, okay, house, okay, that was the Black Homesteader's house, okay, oh, there's a stagecoach. Spend some time and immerse yourself in the history and see what people accomplished when they came out here and there was nothing out here. Today, there are 27 buildings, and each one has the proper decor for its time period. That was another thing that Dobby did really well was, okay, we got this building, but what would be in it? He's not going to put a television in the saloon because the saloon didn't have televisions at the time. Today, maybe, if you had a saloon today, it might have a TV in it, but back then, no. What's going to be in it? And so that's what's in these buildings, including, you go to the bordello, what was in there? I've been in the bordello. It is very, very small. There's room for a bed, a little changing area, and closet, and one of those makeup. Oh God, I'll have to turn in my girl card. One of those little makeup things where you sit and you got all your makeup on it, and you usually have like an oval mirror. I don't remember what it's called, but you got one of those there, and that's probably all they needed in the bordello. Maybe a hammer in case one of those young men being educated got out of hand. Anyway, Dobby's Fall Festival is held each September, and it's a pretty lively time. There's lots of crafts and games and food, and you can ask the volunteers histories of different things, and it's a lot of fun. If you can make it out there in September, go. They also usually have some speakers and some musicians who come out just to make it a bit more cool. I know the Green Valley Homesteaders, just local group of volunteers that play banjo, cello, horns, violins, harmonicas. They're all volunteers, and they just go and play at different places. I was down at the Heritage Estates nursing home a few weeks ago, and I forget the name of the group, but they came in and they played a bunch of music for the residents there. And, they had all the different instruments there playing, and everybody had a good time. And I don't sing. You don't want to hear me sing because it sounds like I'm killing cats. But I sang. And had a good time, and it was fun. So anyway, I'm going to put in a little personal plug now. Dobby's always needs volunteers. If you live in the Alliance area, heck, even if you live in Scottsbluff, and you can go up and volunteer. Volunteer. These buildings are old, and they always need repairs and paintings. The yard needs mowing, weeding, trimming. That stuff needs to be done every year, all the time. So say you're a volunteer, you can drive up there, once a month to mow the lawn. And then maybe there's 3 other volunteers that go, the other 3 weeks, whatever. And when it's open, there isn't any staff. It's the volunteers that can give tours to the visitors. So go up there and learn about Dobby's and then be like, hey, I can volunteer here. Granted, it's much easier if you live in the Alliance area to be a volunteer, but I really don't think they would turn down a volunteer that could go up there, once a week. But call them and ask. Dobby's Frontier Town also doesn't charge admission, so in addition to the volunteers, all the donation money, 100% of the donation money, goes to things like paying for utilities. And yes, some of the buildings have electricity. The main house has electricity. The donations go to materials for the upkeep of the town. So, we need to paint this thing again. So we need to buy some paint. That comes from volunteer money. Or donations, not volunteer money. They've also kind of modernized in a little bit. They have QR codes on the buildings where you can just hit the QR code and then donate Venmo, Cash App. I'm trying to remember all the different places. But if you just are sitting at home and you're like, hey, I want to donate to Dobby's, you can also go to their website, and they got the QR codes on their website too, and you can donate. They also have 2 donation barrels where you can drop cash at Dobby's. One is in the church and one is in the general store. So there's lots of ways you can donate and help keep this history alive. It is a very unique way of keeping history alive, and you might walk into it at first if you don't know anything about it and just be like, what is all this junk? It's not junk, and learn about it, and you'll understand, and you'll walk away not only smarter, but with a better appreciation of what the people who came before us did so that we could be here today in our awesome little houses with too many lights in their basement and a poorly constructed HVAC system. Just saying. So, according to a 2025 article titled One Man's Dream by Jana Bommersbach in True West magazine, there have been visitors from all 50 states and 33 countries. Dobby's gets about 5,000 to 6,000 visitors a year. In a July 18, 2025 interview with 1011 News, Lori White said, it's important to preserve history. She also said something that reminded me of why I do this podcast and why I wanted to do this podcast, even if I never make any money at it. She said, our memories are wonderful as long as we have things that jog our memories. If we don't have those reminders, our memories are lost and forgotten. Out here, I've had many people come out and say, I remember when. It brings back the memories and brings tears of gladness to those people. And that's what this is all about. So that about wraps it up for Dobby's Frontier Town this week. Really, though, if you get a chance to go there, take the opportunity and see it in person and decide for yourself. Carhenge is also just down the road. You can easily see both in the same day and just have an awesome day because of it, because they're 2 very cool things that are unique to Western Nebraska and I think unique in the country. So that's it for me. Next week I'm going to come back and I should have Dorothy's story finished, and it should be the next episode. I just want to get everything all tied together with Dobby's before I move on to something else. So hope you enjoyed everything today, folks. I'm Irene, and this is Storytelling on the Plains.